Welcome to Your Family Health. This is Dr. Cook Gerard, and I'm here with Professor Joan Buckley and Caleb Gerard. We're here from the nursing department, and we're here at Nassau Community College. Your Family Health is a program that focuses on healthcare issues and resources available here in Nassau County. On this show, we speak to experts from around the country to keep you up to date with current healthcare issues and trends. Today, we'll be speaking to Dr. David Hanscom, and he wrote a book about Roadmap Out of Chronic Pain, and we'll be addressing chronic pain and the caregiver. So if you want to know more about how to stay healthy in Nassau County, stay tuned for the next half hour to the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
So welcome to the show, Dr. David Hanscom.
Thank you.
We've been this route before, and we've talked about your book in 2012. I think it was Back in Control, and then you had a revision to Back in Control. And the last time we spoke, I asked you to introduce yourself. So I want you to introduce yourself to the listening audience again, and then we're going to transition this whole conversation to where we kind of left off in the past. Does that sound good? Yeah. I mean, I know you're an orthopedic spine surgeon, but you're more than that. So let's...
Well, I'm an orthopedic spine surgeon. I've been practicing now for over 30 years, and my specialty is complex spine surgery, which means I end up doing a lot of surgery on people who've had failed prior surgeries. And I was one of those surgeons who, for 7 or 8 years of my practice, was very aggressive doing surgery. I was trained that it was the right thing to do, that if everything else had been tried, that surgery was always a definitive answer. It turned out that one of the surgeries I was doing, which is a fusion for low back pain, had a success rate of about 25%, but we didn't know that at the time. So in 1993, when that data became available, I just stopped. In the meantime, I went through a horrendous 15-year tailspin into chronic pain myself, and I fortunately emerged from that in around 2003, and I've been relatively pain-free for over 10 years, and not only pain-free, actually thriving. But I wrote a book in 2012, Back in Control, a spine surgeon's roadmap out of chronic pain, and it really reflects my journey right from the very bottom. I learned none of this in medical school, residency, or fellowship. It was in private practice that I started to learn it, and it was through my horrendous ordeal that I really learned the details. And then I rewrote the book November 2016, and I called it a surgeon's roadmap instead of a spine surgeon's, because it turns out that it applies to any chronic pain. And there's over 30 different symptoms of chronic pain that respond to these tools. At the worst part of my ordeal, when your system's full of stress chemicals, every organ system responds in its own way. So I had 16 of these symptoms at the same time, and now I have none. I'm fine. So we've watched hundreds of patients now come out of this hole, and I think the perspective I provide is that I'm just having the patients apply as a self-directed program, applying known effective treatments in a structured manner, and chronic pain is curable. It's a solvable problem. So I'm excited about it, and I'm now seeing surgical patients go pain-free without the surgery, which has been very unexpected. And so it's been a remarkably interesting phase of my career, or I'll use the word rewarding beyond words. It's been remarkable.
Wow. Caleb has a question for you.
I have a question. So what is the difference between chronic pain and acute pain? Can you just describe that?
Well, that's been very interesting. When I was in medical school, which has been a while now, we have thought that the brain had a certain number of nerve cells that you could only lose after age 25. And it turns out there's a concept called neuroplasticity where the brain changes by the minute. You hit new nerve cells, new connections, new myelin, all sorts of stuff called neuroplasticity. So we found out that when pain's in the brain, it gets memorized in about 3 to 6 months. It's like an athlete learning a skill. And these pathways get embedded in the nervous system. They get connected with other life events. And the neuroscience now shows you, I actually can see the pathways in the brain on these functional MRI scans. So basically, it's defined as a pain memory that cannot be erased because it's connected with so many of the neurological connections. So it's actually a neurological diagnosis.
Wow.
So tell me the types of pain that you address with your roadmap. What disease processes? Is it neuropathic pain? Is it fibromyalgia? What are the cancer pain? What other kinds of pains?
It's everything. It turns out it doesn't matter where the pain comes from. So some of my symptoms were migraine headaches. I had ringing in my ears, burning in my feet, back pain, neck pain. But what it really turns out, what the worst pain is anxiety. And it turns out that anxiety is not psychological. It's simply a chemical reaction to sensory input. So what the new book shows, this is based on new neuroscience research, and I struggled with this for a couple of years to figure this out, but anxiety is the pain. And when you feel anxiety, all you're feeling is adrenaline. So, for instance, your body, you survive on this planet by processing sensory input, then you behave in a way that keeps you in a safe zone, so you're not staring at bright lights or listening to loud sounds. But when you're exposed to one of those, your body secretes stress chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, then you feel anxious. The research also shows that humans have a problem that other creatures don't, in that thoughts do the same thing. They go to the same part of the brain, they give you the same chemical response, then you feel anxiety. So again, anxiety is that unconscious automatic reaction to adverse sensory input. The problem that humans have compared to other animals is that you can't escape your thoughts. You either suffer, suppress, or mask your thoughts. You're trapped by your thoughts. So it's the rule that as people get older, their anxiety gets progressively worse just with repetition. And since it's such a basic survival feeling, and this is the worst part of my ordeal, was the anxiety. And when we ask patients whether they want to get rid of their pain or their anxiety, the vast majority of them want to get rid of their anxiety. When I went through my ordeal, I had extreme anxiety, and I didn't become a major spine surgeon by having anxiety. I became one by suppressing it. And I was very good at it, but all of a sudden I started having panic attacks, sweating, burning sensations ringing in my ears. I had no idea what was going on. And what happens, even though you can consciously suppress anxiety, your body still perceives it, so it's a problem. So the critical part about understanding anxiety is not psychological, is that the unconscious brain is 1 million times stronger than the conscious brain, and your brain will develop wherever you place its attention. So if you want to talk about anxiety, analyze it, try to fix it, you're actually reinforcing the pathways. So you might as well put your hand right into a hornet's nest.
But everybody has anxiety, and I thought anxiety was kind of like the reason we're safe. Like if we have a little anxiety, we react a different way. So is your roadmap, and I know we've talked about this before, is it a direction, like how to reduce anxiety, and then as a result of that reduction of anxiety or that control over someone's anxiety, the pain is, it can't really go away, correct? Or can it actually go away?
It disappears. It goes. It's not about managing chronic pain. The pain really does go away. And here's the deal. So you can't control anxiety. I mean, it's a necessary survival reflex that you have to have. You would die without anxiety.
Right.
But what happens if you fight it, try to suppress it, deal with it, you actually give it neurological attention.
Mm-hmm.
So as you learn to live with it and understand that it is a necessary part of life, then you use what we call somatic tools to basically decrease adrenaline response. I mean, the problem is what happens, you have stress, and you're supposed to react to stress by taking action, right?
Right.
The problem that humans have, we get these stories in our head that are really not reality. They're our version of reality, and we start getting phobias and overreacting. So you have things causing anxiety that aren't really real, but they're real to us because our body's chemically responding. Then the chemical response gets hyperactive, and you start getting panic attacks, which is just adrenaline, and it's miserable. I mean, raw, unrelenting anxiety is miserable beyond words. It was the worst part of my ordeal by far. And again, I had no idea what happened. I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, I know now why it would happen, but, I had a tough background, abusive family background. That's about as bad as it gets, and I did all the right things. I came out of it. I went to medical school. I became very energetic and responsible. So there's nothing I did to deserve this, and neither do my patients have this. They don't deserve it either. And so if we were just taught these principles, like in first grade and preschool, which I've actually started a project on that, and just learn how to decrease adrenaline response. As you know, there's some mindfulness work being done in schools, which is great. But there's some really simple tools just to calm down the adrenaline, and as you calm down the adrenaline, remember, when you feel anxiety, you're feeling just the adrenaline. And again, that's not psychological. So as you learn how to dampen the adrenaline response, but also substitute other reactions instead of an automatic survival reaction, as you use the anxiety pathways less, they start to atrophy, and it's like directing a river into a different channel. You are using the anxiety pathways less, and you're using creative, enjoyable play pathways more, why it makes a big difference.
You know, I met somebody once who, and it may have been through the radio show, but when she lived with chronic pain, and the way she dealt with it, and this is probably going to segue into our next part that we wanted to bring up, was the caregiver, is she would identify her days. So she would, and maybe this was a way of acknowledging the pain, or I'm not sure how it works, but she would wear a certain color shoelace on the days that she was having horrible pain. Right. And that was an identifying marker for the people she worked with. They knew what that meant, and they knew to avoid her. But if you live with someone with chronic pain, right, you can't really have them get up in the morning and say, hey, what kind of day you're having, because there's 365 days in a year, and relationships last a lot longer than 1 year.
You can almost anticipate it.
So what is the, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what is the advice for the person with the pain? We know that they can follow back in control and try to change the way they react to the pain, right? Reduction in anxiety. But what is the role of the caregiver in this? Or the person, even just living with them, sometimes you become the caregiver.
Right.
In a weird way.
Well, chronic pain is devastating to families, and by definition, couples trigger each other. In other words, you have family patterns passed on to you from your parents that now play out in your new family. And so anytime you're anxious or angry, it means you're being triggered by a survival reaction. And what happens if your spouse upsets you, you want to blame your spouse or partner, not you, but really they just triggered a response in you. And it has nothing to do with them. And that's the hardest part about this model, is that you have to take full responsibility for everything, including your anxiety and frustration. So there's one paper that's very interesting, and I'm now watching this very carefully. Couples in chronic pain are sort of miserable because, first of all, the person in pain tends to complain about their pain a lot, which is very frustrating to the partner or spouse. And they can't do much about it. So they like this person, they're connected to this person, and they can't do much about it. So it's very, very frustrating, number one. Second of all, the pain complaints tend to be the same, so that it becomes tedious. And it just brings an energy in the house that's really negative, and all the good parts of relationships started getting crushed by this ongoing chronic pain. By the way, if you talk about the pain, one of the rules in my first stage of the book is that you simply never talk about your pain to anybody, particularly your family.
Oh.
When we come back from the break, I'll go through the sequence that I go through with couples that's been very effective. So if you're trying to heal from chronic pain and you go home and get triggered, of course, neurons that fire together wire together, which is the saying in the neuroscientists. In other words, if you're angry and frustrated, whatever is causing anger and frustration is not connected to pain pathways, which also cause anger and frustration. So anxiety and anger are that link to outside circumstances that kick up the pain. So if you're trying to heal from the pain and going home and getting triggered by your spouse, it's a problem. So probably one of the most difficult factors of keeping people in pain is the family, but we're also, at least I'm beginning to find out that using the family as a way of healing is probably the most powerful way of coming out of the pain pathways.
Wow.
Okay, we really is going to be interested in talking about that, the person in the community who's dealing with pain and how family members can address it. You're listening to Your Family Health on the Voice of Nassau Community College at 90.3 WHPC. This is Dr. Cook Gerard. I'm here with Professor Joan Buckley, and we will continue talking to Dr. David Hanskin about chronic pain and the caregiver after this short break.
When I grow up, I want to be a new pair of blue jeans.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's first computer.
When I grow up, I want to be a glass countertop in a new home.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's best birthday present.
When I grow up, I want to be a football stadium.
When I grow up, I want to be a warm fleece on a cold day.
When I grow up, I want to be a fancy backsplash.
I want to be a bike that races around the country.
When I grow up,
I want to be a bench on a forest trail. I want to be a rocking chair on a sunny porch. I want to be a skyscraper. I want to be
When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.